What's up, booktube? Welcome back. My name is Laura if you're new here, and today I'm going over what I read in March. So if you recall from a couple of previous videos, I have been in like the worst reading slump ever throughout the end of February and like the entirety of March. So this is going to be a very quick wrap up. I am finally out of my reading slump, so thank the good Lord. But March was rough. I read a grand total of 1,017 pages over 6 books. And when I say books, I mean 1 short story collection and 5 comic books. So not a whole lot of reading done last month. I did move at the beginning of March, so like it was understandable that I was not reading very much. I was very busy, plus like still working full time, so you know, didn't have a whole lot of time for books, unfortunately. But let's just get right into it, starting with the first book that I read, which was Tales from the Hinterland by Melissa Albert, which very nicely matches my shirt actually. I didn't realize that. But this book is part of the world of the Hazelwood, which is a duology about a girl who is the estranged granddaughter of this woman who wrote this book of fairy tales, and the whole plot of that duology centers around the stories that were told in the Tales from the Hinterland. And so this is the book of fairy tales. The author actually wrote what the grandmother wrote in the book, and which is what I wanted so badly, because with the Hazelwood I hated the main character and I wasn't huge on the plot, but the world was beautiful. It was so wonderfully written. This is a portal fantasy into a fairy tale world, so like this is right up my alley. If you don't know, I am obsessed with portal fantasy as well as fairy tales. Like this is perfectly suited for me specifically. Like this is just for me, and it was amazing. I gave this one a full 5 stars. I absolutely adored it. They were really interesting fairy tales, but they were also really creepy, which I wasn't expecting. For some reason I didn't think that this was going to be a like horror book of fairy tales, but it was, and I was so beyond here for that. These were all like really chilling and terrifying, but also so beautiful, and all of the worlds in these fairy tales were just fascinating, but like they're all connected too. All of these stories take place in this place called the Hinterland. They're also vastly different, but they are all somehow connected, and it just worked so well for me. I will definitely be rereading this one at some point. It's also beautiful. Like first of all, the cover and the back of the cover, wow. But then as well, there are all of these beautiful illustrations in here. The end pages are gorgeous. Each chapter has a really beautiful black and red illustration in the front, and then each story has its own individual borders around the pages that somehow tie into what the story is about. So just like visually stunning. This book, like as an object, was very well thought out. It is gorgeous, and the insides are just as beautiful as the outside of it. So overall, amazing, fantastic. I really enjoyed this one, and I got 5 stars. So that was the only like actual book that I read last month, but I did have a couple days off in a row from work, so I decided to do a little 48-hour comic book readathon. I find that comics are a fantastic way to get out of a reading slump for me, so I decided to pick up a bunch off my shelf and my roommate's shelf and just try and help myself get out of this reading slump, and it did help a little bit. But I read 5 comics over the course of the weekend, and I started with The Tea Dragon Society by Kay O'Neill. I also read the second book, The Tea Dragon Festival, right afterwards, and I adored both of these. They both got 5 stars for me. They were so cute. Oh my god. So the first book here is about a young girl. She's a small child, but her parents are blacksmiths, I think, and so she's learning the trade, and one day she comes across this little tiny tea dragon who is like about to be eaten by some wild dogs. So she saves it, and her mom just happens to know who the owner is, so she brings the tea dragon back to the owner, and so he asks her if she wants to start to learn how to care for tea dragons, and she agrees. There's really no plot to this book. It's literally just this little girl learning how to care for tea dragons and making friends along the way, and it was so precious. It was, oh my god, it was so cute. In the second book, it takes place in the same village but in the past. So the guy who owned the tea dragon in the first book, this book takes place when he's younger, and it's about this kid who finds a sleeping dragon in a like forgotten shrine, and they find out that this dragon was actually supposed to be protecting the town, but he was put to sleep by this forest creature, and he's been asleep for 80 years. So book 2 is just about this dragon waking up and starting to actually fulfill his duties while they also prepare for the Tea Dragon Festival, and they all just become this big beautiful happy family along the way. It was also adorable and precious and just everything good in this world. Oh my god, they were so good. These are just so good. Like, if you need to be happy one day, just pick up this book, or book 2, either one. They were wonderful. I cannot wait for the next book to come out. I feel like I will probably read these books whenever I need a quick pick-me-up, if I'm in a bad mood and I just need to feel some joy. These books will give me that. So wonderful, 5 stars each. So good. Next up in my comic book readathon, I read volumes 1 and 2 of The Old Guard by Greg Rucka. Book 1 is called Opening Fire, and book 2 is called Force Multiplied. So this series is about a group of people who are temporarily immortal. They will die eventually, they just don't know when. The youngest person in the group is about 200 years old, and the oldest is over 6,000. So they will eventually die, they just have no idea when or why or what their purpose is. So basically they have to stay in hiding, which is becoming increasingly harder as we get more technology and everything. But they know that if they were to be found out, they would be hunted and tested on and used to find the key to immortality for the rest of the world, which is what ends up happening in the first volume of this book. Somebody puts it together and they are on the run from this man, while at the same time they've realized that there's somebody else in the world who's just realized that they're also immortal, so they have to go and find her and bring her to be part of that group and get to know her as well. I loved both of these. They were so good. I watched the movie sometime last year and I've watched it several times since. I fucking love this movie. It is so good. So I wanted to read the comics as well, and they were also really good too. I do prefer the movie a little bit better just because I like the characters and the banter a bit more, but the comics were still fantastic. The writing is amazing. I'm just really not a big fan of the art. It's just not my personal favorite style, but the colors are beautiful. Like, it's very vibrant. And just like stunning colors. I just don't like how they draw faces, basically. So because of the art, these books both got 4 stars each, but if they had an art style that I liked a bit better, then they probably would have gotten 5 stars just for the story alone. They were amazing and I really enjoyed them. I think there's going to be a 3rd one coming out at some point. I'm not sure when, but eventually, but I will absolutely be reading that one as well. But in the meantime, I will just settle for rewatching that movie like literally once a week. It's fine. I'm obsessed. And then finally, the last book that I read for this readathon, as well as for the entire month, is Nimona by Noelle Stevenson. This one was really fun and quirky and weird, but like a good time. This one is about a supervillain named Lord Abolister Blackheart, who is, you know, this evil genius kind of superhero, like very typical cliche kind of supervillain, but like in a really fun way. Like, this book was playing on those cliches in a really fun way, but he is just going about his normal villain life when all of a sudden this kid named Nimona just shows up and she's like, hey, I want to be your sidekick. And he tries to say no and she's like, too bad. And so they just kind of go about their days together being evil and doing evil things, but they end up realizing that the good guys are not so good and they have to try and put a stop to them and also, you know, take over the world together. So it's pretty fun. There's more to it as well. There's a plot twist later on that I was kind of expecting but also not really, and it was just a really good time. Of all the comics that I read during that weekend, this one was definitely my least favorite, but I still really enjoyed it. I gave it a 3.5 star. I like silly humor, but I don't like stupid humor, if that makes sense. There's a very fine line between those two, and this book was mostly silly humor, but sometimes it towed the line onto the stupid side of humor. So it didn't quite get to 4 stars because of that, but it was still really funny. I laughed out loud several times, but there were also some very touching moments, and just overall this was a really fun book. And I do actually want to read more from this author as well, because like their writing style was hilarious and like the art was also adorable too. It's this very like cartoony kind of style that really matched the story perfectly. Overall, it was very well thought out and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Alright, and that is the end of probably the shortest wrap up that I will ever do. This was not a good reading month for me in terms of quantity, but that's okay. I still enjoyed everything that I read, so that's all that matters. But so far for this month, I am doing way better, so that's good. But yeah, that'll do it for today's video. So comment down below if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them. But in the meantime, that'll do it for today. So thank you all so much for watching. I hope you're having a fantastic day wherever you are in the world, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye!